And we are here. Part 2 of the Sly Hooper award show, end of the regular season NBA award show, where we will discuss Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and of course, because I did 3 quarter checkpoint videos throughout the damn season, the Most Valuable Player Award. But first, let's go with Coach of the Year. Number 1, I think it's pretty unanimous. It should be unanimous. Mike Brown of the Sacramento Kings. Honestly speaking, I thought the Kings had a chance to be a play-in team before the season started. I thought their offense could be pretty good, given that they, made a bunch of moves in the offseason to get shooters around Fox and Sabonis. Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk. But to have the Kings at 48 wins, at one point they were second in the Western Conference, but now they're third, obviously. But they have the greatest offensive rating in regular season NBA history. Mike Brown was able to get the most out of Fox, Sabonis, plugged in Keegan Murray. By the way, early in the season, Brown was shuffling through, should I have KZ Okpala starting? We need a defensive wing. Really, their best defensive wing is Harrison Barnes and maybe Kessler Edwards if he gets spot minutes, but he only gets spot minutes. And the fact that the Kings are this good and got the Kings to their first playoff appearance in 16 fucking years. Yeah, Mike Brown is Coach of the Year. Second, I have Mark Daigneault of the Oklahoma City Thunder. It speaks for itself. Oklahoma City is a young-ass team. Mark Daigneault just seems like the perfect coach to navigate the ship of a young Oklahoma City Thunder team, and he was just great all year for them. Put players in the best position to win. The Thunder are the preeminent driving kick team in the NBA. Gave guys like my dog Isaiah Joe a chance. Fucking Doc Rivers. But anyway, Mark Daigneault is second on my ballot for Coach of the Year. And then 3, I have Mike Budenholzer. And, there are parts of Bucks internet that, were shouting from the rooftops that Mike Budenholzer should get Coach of the Year consideration. And when you think about it, Mike Budenholzer revamped the Bucks defense. They used to pack the paint and allow a lot of threes. Now they're taking away both. He had to navigate injuries to Chris Middleton, Giannis. Drew Holiday missed some games as well, but he was able to still right the ship. He has many different lineup combinations to play with because of the Bucks' versatility across the board. And I think Mike Budenholzer was just spectacular for the Bucks this year. And they have the best record in the NBA. So that gets Mike Budenholzer the 3rd spot on my Coach of the Year ballot. Now let's move on to Rookie of the Year. I mean, it should be obvious, but Paolo Banchero is the Rookie of the Year. Now, I understand his efficiency dropped precipitously, especially since the new year, but the Magic have been a actually solid team for the last 3 months, and Paolo Banchero is the bellwether for that team. The ball handling responsibilities, the shot creation responsibilities, the playmaking responsibilities. Now, yes, he has Franz Wagner. Yes, he has Wendell Carter, but it is clear that Paolo Banchero took a bigger role than those players and was the fulcrum of the Magic offense. And he was actually a better defender than I expected him to be coming out of Duke. So Paolo Banchero is my Rookie of the Year. He was my Rookie of the Year leader the whole way. Yes, Jalen Williams made a late push, and yes, post All-Star break, Jalen Williams made a bigger jump and has shown flashes of being an All-Star caliber type of player. But it just wasn't enough for me for J-Dub to take over Paolo Banchero, especially given that J-Dub also gets to play off of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, and the talent around him. Not taking anything away from Jalen Williams, but that's the reality of it. They play different roles, and to me, Paolo Banchero just was more impressive in that role. So Paolo Banchero's my Rookie of the Year. Jalen Williams is second, and then Walker Kessler is third. Now, 2 months into the year, it looked like Benedict Mathurin was going to be second, but he has just tailed off, and his defense is not good. Walker Kessler was just fantastic for the Jazz, a rebounding machine when he starts, a shot-blocking menace like his predecessor Rudy Gobert, but Walker Kessler already has better hands, and man, the Wolves just have to be fucking regretting that trade, because Walker Kessler, essentially, not saying he is as good as Rudy Gobert right now, but for that contract, you're getting Rudy Gobert-type-esque production for 95% less of the salary, and he can do a little bit more on the offensive end and actually catch a fucking basketball and finish around the rim. Walker Kessler was fucking good for the Jazz this year. And with Kessler and Lauri Markkanen set in stone as the center and power forward, the Jazz have their front court of the future. And at the beginning of the year, I thought their front court of the future might have involved Victor Wembanyama. And it doesn't look like it's going to be the case now, but Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen have set themselves in stone to me as the Jazz starting front court for at least the foreseeable future. Can't always project 10 years into the future just because of how quick the NBA changes, but Walker Kessler is third on my ballot for Rookie of the Year. Now we move to Defensive Player of the Year, and this one was tough for me. Yesterday, I had Evan Mobley as my Defensive Player of the Year, but looking into it more, looking over the numbers again, different lineup combinations for these top three guys, impact on defense, blocked shots, switching, all that. I'm going with Jaren Jackson Jr. as my Defensive Player of the Year for the second year in a row. Jaren Jackson Jr. was my pick last year, and he is my pick again this year. I thought about Brook Lopez at 1. I thought about Evan Mobley at 1. And then, to me, it came down between Mobley and Jaren Jackson Jr. And I know the minutes thing is a big deal, and I know the foul trouble is a big concern, and I get the argument of, well, would you take super immense production on a permanent basis in a short amount of time, or would you take more minutes of elite defense? And Evan Mobley's versatility, being able to switch and guard the perimeter, and not just guard the perimeter credibly, but lock up people, his ability to protect the rim, his ability to be a weak side help defender, he is just versatile as hell all over the court. Jaren Jackson Jr. is too, but just the block rate, the 3 blocks per game, the fact that Memphis's defense is just so much better with Jackson on the court, regardless if he plays power forward or center, which he's had to play more of, especially with Steven Adams out. And Jaren Jackson Jr. was just look at all the production, the numbers, what opponents shoot at the rim when Jaren Jackson Jr. is in the vicinity. He was just so good this year. I just had to give it to him. There have been Defensive Player of the Year award winners in the past that have played the same amount of minutes as Jaren Jackson Jr. did this year. Rudy Gobert is one of the prominent examples I can think of. He missed the first 15 or 16 games to start the season because of surgery, but when he came back, Memphis's defensive problems went away. They finished a smidge behind Cleveland in defensive rating per cleaning the glass. But if you look at Jaren Jackson's numbers when he is at center, when he is on the court for Memphis, Memphis had a 108 defensive rating, which is just fucking ridiculous. So I went with Jaren Jackson. Evan Mobley, I had to move down to number 2. And I feel disgusting having Brook Lopez third, given the year he had. This is easily the best defensive season of his career. Very fucking impressive considering that Brook Lopez had back surgery last year and this year just looks better than ever in his age 35 or is it 36 season. Someone's going to have to correct me in the comments below. But Brook Lopez was still fantastic, and if you have him number 1 or number 2, again, to me, it was that close for Defensive Player of the Year. I really didn't consider anyone else. I know Draymond got some votes. I know Bam got some votes, Bam Adebayo, but to me, it was between these 3, and I feel disgusting having Brook third, but that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So now let's move on, finally, to Most Valuable Player. So obviously, the top 3 MVP candidates can go in any order. and that's obviously where everybody's focus is going to be. And then fourth place is pretty clear. That's going to be Jason Tatum. And then fifth was kind of where I also had a little bit of trouble figuring out who was going to be in the fifth spot, but it's the top three guys that we're all here to see who I'm going to name MVP. It's between Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, and Nikola Jokic. And like last year, this is one of those things where I'm fine with whoever gets the award. They are very deserving. But again, this is my award ballot. I'm going to list my choices, my order of choices, and give reasons why, a little bit further of an explainer as to why I picked the choices that I made. Because again, it's most valuable player. This is the most important award. So let's just start from 3 up. Number 3, I have Nikola Jokic here, and it would have been disgusting whoever was going to be placed third on here. Because again, all these guys have legitimate cases to win, but the combination of this being the worst defensive season Jokic has had in a minute, especially with how Denver closed out the last 5 weeks of the season. And yes, I understand Jokic still put up some pretty incredible numbers during Denver's rough patch. When you're splitting hairs in an MVP race, that stuff matters. How you finish the season matters. If Jokic had just ran through the tape, he probably would have been number 1 in a lot of voters' minds. But he didn't. He also had slippage on the defensive end of the floor. And yes, the Nuggets did secure the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. That should be commended. The record was still not as good as the Sixers or the Bucks. So Jokic is third. If you have him first, he definitely has a case to be first, but he is third on my ballot. And so from there, it became a choice between either Giannis or Embiid for me, and I had Giannis number 1 on my third volume of my MVP rankings, just based off the fact that we all know Giannis is the best player in the world. The Bucks have the best record, and Giannis, while his efficiency and his metrics aren't what Giannis usually has, he still averaged a career high in points, and obviously we all saw the stat floating around that's being used a lot. He's the first player in NBA history to average 30, 10, and 5 in a season. Obviously the two-way play as well, and not having Chris Middleton for a lot of the season also factored into this, because Giannis basically, sacrificed his efficiency to start the year by carrying a Bucks team that did not have their second best player, or Chris Middleton, and Drew Holiday missed some games here and there as well, but Giannis still had to keep the ship afloat until everybody got back, and he has just been great all year. But with how Joel Embiid played all season and then turned it up post All-Star break, especially for the month of March and then closing out the season, Embiid got the narrow edge for me to be MVP on my ballot. And I know some of you who watched my award show last year and saw that I picked Embiid last year. I do want to make the case for Embiid because there's been a lot of sympathy MVP talk and pity MVP talk, and how Embiid has no case whatsoever. And I just find that to be horseshit. So I'm going to lay out the case as to why Embiid got the narrow edge for me. One, let's just start with the fact that he was better than last year. He got better from last year to this year, averaging over 33 points per game. And I know people are going to brush that off to the side, being like, oh, so it's just about scoring. No, it's not just the 33 points. It's how he got the 33 points. The fact that he is a 7-foot, 280-pound monster, averaging 33 points per game on 65.5 true shooting, the only other players in NBA history to average 30 a game and have over a 65 true shooting percentage is Steph Curry and Adrian Dantley. So Joel Embiid is scoring at a rate of unanimous MVP Steph Curry in terms of scoring and efficiency, and how that scoring leads and dictates how defenses are covering Joel Embiid, who is the most double-teamed player in the NBA, and how that trickles down to the fact that Embiid is the linchpin of a top 3 offense. He is the only MVP candidate out of the top three, Jokic and Giannis, to be the linchpin of both a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense. If you want to go off NBA.com, the Sixers are third in offensive rating and they are eighth in defensive rating if you want to go off cleaning the glass. The Sixers have the third best offense and the 10th best defense. And the fact that Embiid is responsible for so much on both ends of the floor, and the fact that he also, in addition to being the linchpin of a top 3 offense, a top 4 half-court offense, and it's not just because of Embiid scoring that also leads to him being double and triple teamed. Those passes have to go somewhere. His playmaking has improved, and his playmaking has improved coinciding with the fact that he has made the full migration to the elbow area of the floor, the free throw line, where he has just made that his office and is just a mid-range Death Star demon. He can post up, he can dribble drive, he can shoot the three, he gets to the free throw line at will. He took a massive jump on offense compared to last year, which was already a historically great offensive season for a big man. And this year, he's averaging 33, 10, and 4 on 65.5 true shooting percentage, is the anchor of a top 10 defense. That's where he got the slight edge for me. It's the combination of everything. It's the fact that the Sixers are a 50-plus win team and a top 3 team in the NBA, a top 3 record in the NBA. It's the fact that he is the bellwether on offense and the anchor on defense, leading the team to top 10 categories in both offensive and defensive rating, something his 2 other MVP counterparts cannot claim. It ultimately came down to this for me, and Giannis to me also obviously was a worthy number 1. I had him number 1 heading into the final quarter of the season, and all 3 of them to me were separated by just a hair's margin. It came down to, yes, Giannis is the best player in the world. Yes, Giannis is probably the player besides Stephen Curry and LeBron that I trust the most in the playoffs. But if you're just breaking it down to this individual season, and it's going to be unpopular, I think Embiid was slightly better than Giannis. He was definitely better than Giannis on offense. And defense, Giannis is the better defender. He's a defensive player of the year caliber player, won a defensive player of the year, one of the best defenders in NBA history. But it came down to the roles for me because, and it's going to sound like I'm punishing Giannis for having 2 great defenders on his team, but I'm not. It's just the reality of it, and that's why Giannis's role is different from Embiid's. But Giannis is one of the most special weak side help defenders and rim protectors I have ever seen in my life. Joel Embiid is the backline for the Philadelphia 76ers defense, a defense that is starting Tyrese Maxey and James Harden in the backcourt. And he got that unit to be a top 10 defense, which is so damn impressive to me. And so it came down to the roles for me. And for me, I just put a little more stock, and it's more impressive to me, slightly more impressive to me, that Embiid has anchored a top 10 defense with defensive personnel while solid and definitely more deeper than what Embiid has probably had in his career. It's still not the level of Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, and trust me, my argument for this is consistent because Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday and Giannis are all on my all-defensive team. But if you're just talking about for this award and isolating it down and splitting hairs, I think Embiid's responsibilities on the defensive end, while also being the fulcrum, the catalyst of a top 3 offense, was just slightly more impressive to me. And Embiid caught up super fast because the Sixers started off 12-12. Embiid's first 3 games of the year were just super slow. He did not start the season off right. He had plantar fasciitis, whatever. But the Sixers have been one of the best teams in the NBA since December, and Embiid has just shot up the rankings all year. Like, you can go back and look through all my most valuable player volume rankings, Embiid always had the numbers, but once the Sixers started winning and winning at a high rate, the winning combined with the numbers and the production had Embiid shooting up my MVP rankings. I had Jokic 1 at one point. I had Giannis 1 at one point. And I think with the way Embiid has played all year, and especially with how he closed out the season post-All-Star break, and you can also look at the numbers post-All-Star break for Giannis compared to Embiid, and obviously the slump that Denver went through, and just how the Nuggets basically just looked like they didn't care the last 4 weeks of the season, Embiid got the edge for me. And to me, Embiid was the most valuable player. And real quickly, I want to add in this part because I spent so much time talking about the top 3 candidates that I forgot to record this part. But 4th place, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, Jason Tatum got the 4th spot. I mean, he still averaged at the end of the day 30 points per game on 60 true shooting and provided great two-way play as well for a Celtics team that is top 5 in both offensive and defensive rating. And then the 5th spot, it became a lot more interesting once it became clear that the Mavericks and Luka Doncic were going to miss out on the play-in. I thought SGA, I thought Donovan Mitchell, I thought for sure Donovan Mitchell was going to be my 5th spot, but I landed on Domantas Sabonis. And the reason I went with Sabonis just slightly over Mitchell is because Sabonis was the hub of the greatest offensive rating in NBA history. He had a career year, 19, 12, and 7 on nearly 62% shooting from the field, was easily the 3rd team All-NBA center. I don't even think it was close, or there was no other cases. But Sabonis was fantastic this year for the Kings and led the Kings to their first playoff appearance in 16 years. Him and De'Aaron Fox, obviously, but with Sabonis' ability to be a hub anywhere from the low post to the high post where they could run their split actions off of him and the DHOs, it really just opened a lot of layers for the Kings offense, which is their identity, and in turn has led them to winning 48 games this year. And I thought Sabonis was the supercharger behind that, along with Fox, of course, but with Sabonis' ability to open up the portfolio, the smorgasbord, the menu of stuff that the Kings could run offensively, Sabonis got the edge at the 5th spot for me. Those are my picks for my awards. If you disagree, feel free to leave a comment below. Let's chat about it. Why do you have Giannis 1? Why do you have Jokic 1? Again, all 3 of these guys have a case to win the MVP. If you have Giannis or Jokic 1, I'm not going to hold you. This sounds like a cop-out, but it's not. All 3 of these guys, in some ways, in some elements of their game, got better than last year. Now, while Giannis' efficiency took a bit to catch back up to his semi-normal standards, he still had a career year in scoring. Joel Embiid boosted his efficiency to career highs, boosted his scoring to career highs, and for the first time in his era, led the Sixers to a top 3 offense now that he has a point guard that will shoot a basketball. Jokic, his efficiency is absurd and almost averaged a 25-point triple-double for the number 1 team in the Western Conference. All 3 of them have cases, but when you factor in conference, how tough the Eastern Conference is compared to the West, the Nuggets slump, Embiid turning it up, the Bucks basically playing for the number 1 seed and then resting some of their guys towards the end. And while it was an all-time great Giannis season, it wasn't one of his best career seasons. And Embiid just getting better again and anchoring once again a top 10 defense and also being the catalyst of a top 3 offense. Embiid got the edge for me.